Hello everyone, I'm Tara, the dance doctor. Welcome to my channel. In today's video, we're working on adding some more advanced techniques to steps that we've covered in the Kizomba Basics 1 and 2 videos, as well as adding some variations and a new figure. At the end of this video, I teach an extended practice routine, including all of the steps and techniques that we've worked on thus far. As always, I'll be putting timestamps for each section of the video in the description box below so you can easily find the part of the video that you're looking for. If you love my content and want to get early access to my videos or just support my YouTube dance school, you can go to my Patreon page, which there is also a link to in the description box. We're going to get right into the lesson. I just want to remind you to give this video a like, subscribe to my channel, and turn on the post notifications so you can see when I upload more stuff like this. Now let's get dancing.
So as I said in the intro, part of today's lesson is going to be revisiting some steps that we did in the first two Kizomba Basics lessons to add some more sophisticated and more detailed technique to those steps so that they start to look and feel more authentically like Kizomba. And the other part of this lesson is going to be adding a few new figures into the mix and then putting everything together to form a longer and more complete practice routine for you. I do get asked a lot if the steps that I teach in these lessons are just for lady styling or if they are steps that we do with a partner. And all the steps that I'm teaching, although you can use them for lady styling practice, are figures that we dance when we are dancing with a partner. So the first figure that we're going to work on today is basic 1. So we're coming back to our very first basic that we learned. As I said in the first Kizomba Basics video, Kizomba is a walking dance, which means that every time we take a step, we are going to be lifting our foot off the ground and placing it back down. Part of today's video is going to be learning that when we lift the foot off the ground, in certain situations, we're not lifting the entire foot off the ground. In the first lesson that I gave, I wanted every step that we took, if it wasn't a rock step, to be lifting off the ground so that we really feel our weight changing completely to the other foot and then feel that weight dropping back down onto the foot that we're walking onto. But now that we've done that, I want to add a little bit more sophistication to the technique that we're using. So, like I said, we're coming back to our basic 1, which is just our walking in place. So it's our 1, push 2, 3, push 4. 1, push 2, 3, push 4. And like I said in the first video, we were doing this by lifting the foot off the ground and placing it back down. We're going to do something very similar in this video, although just slightly modified. And that is, we are going to only lift the heel off the ground and then place it back down. Again, the reason that I teach lifting the whole foot off the ground first is so that we really feel that correlation between the hip moving and the foot lifting off the ground and then placing that foot back on the ground with this knee bent and then pushing, release, step, push, release, step, push, so that when we start to add this more subtle technique, which is actually the authentic Kizomba technique, we're familiar with that feeling of releasing, stepping, and pushing so that we don't end up doing something else in the body that is not actually correct. So, I want to practice this. Like I said, instead of lifting the whole foot off the ground now, we want to try and get the same sensation in our body, but just lifting the heel. So, as I lift my heel, I always feel like I have this feeling in my body like lifting the heel is letting the air out of the balloon, and that's what causes my hip to tilt. So I let the air out of the balloon, And now, without moving anything else in my body, my hips stay on this angle that I've created. I'm going to put the heel down, push into the ground, and then here I'm going to let the air out on the other side. Put the heel down and press. Lift the heel, put it down and press. Lift, put it down and press. Very important. Lift. This should feel pretty intuitive. What a lot of my students do, which is incorrect, is they'll shift their hips as they put the heel down. What helps us create this wave action in the body that is very specific to Kizomba is the fact that after I let the air out, I'm putting the heel down without shifting my hips, which naturally sends my hips just a little bit behind me. And that is what creates that wave. So that we don't have to think too much about creating a body roll, because in my experience that causes a lot of tension in the body. We want to just allow the lower half of our body to work for us and then naturally create that wave so that it looks really natural and effortless. And so like I said, that's created from what we're doing with our feet. So let's try that again. Be really conscious of the angle of the hips as it relates to what my feet and my knees are doing. So I go, and lifting the heel, let this tilt. Put the heel down without changing the angle of the tilt and the hips, and naturally that is going to send my hip on my left side back. Then I push into the ground to come up into neutral and release back as I put the heel down. Release, the hips tilt, I put the heel down, my hips go back, or they're tilting forward, but they're physically going behind me. Push to come up into neutral, release. Now my hips are on an angle down toward the left. I put the heel down and I increase that anterior tilt in my pelvis. Push, release, heel down. Push, release, heel down. Push, release, heel down. Push, release, heel down, push. Okay? So now we are going to try to apply this technique to our basic one with music. Start with halftime and then we'll continue on in real time. 5, 6, 7, 8, and 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. Kizomba lesson is our basic number 2. In the first lesson, what we were working on was really getting used to putting pressure into the floor when we tap and allowing that to change the angle of our pelvis. So we're really getting used to this feeling in the body of this push and release, and how that changes the angle of the pelvis. We are going to continue to work on that today, but we are going to soften the movement a little bit and make it a little bit more circular instead of so angular. The angular tap is a phase that we need to pass through so that we can really get used to that feeling, like I said, of the push and release, and we're going to continue to use that feeling in this new version of our basic 2. So, we're going side, tap, and as we learned in the first Kizomba basics lesson, we go side, tap, and side, tap, and. Now, we are going to add, like I said, a circular motion in the hips so that we're not just lifting and releasing. So So we're going side, and now here I'm going to push into the floor to create a half circle with the side of my hip in which I am tapping. So in this case, it's my left side. So I'm going back, up, and around. Okay, so I'll do that from the side. I go back, up, and around, and then I'm ready to step to the other side. So now I go to the left, and I'm going to push into my right foot, back, up, and around. Step, and I'm pushing back, up, around. Step, pushing into this tapping foot, putting pressure without dropping that heel, back, up, and around. So what happens when I put pressure on this foot is the knee is going to try to straighten. We don't want to actually straighten it all the way, but we want the trying to straighten action to affect what our hips are doing. So I'm pushing into the floor, and it causes my hips to go back up and then settle back down to where they started, okay? So let's try that again slowly. We go step, back, up, and around. Step, back, up, and around. Step, back, up, around. Step, back, up, around. Step, back, up, around. Step, back, up, and around. Okay, so now let's try that one with music. Half time, here we go. Number 3. So in our first Kizomba Basics video, I taught a version of this step as it was taught to me as a student, which was 2 walks back, rocking, 2 walks forward, and rocking. And the reason that we teach it this way in the beginning is because it occupies 8 counts, and so it's a little bit easier to wrap your head around as a student than a step that occupies 6 counts, which doesn't perfectly fit into the structure of the music. But it's something that we need to get used to when we're dancing Kizomba, that we're not always going to be dancing exactly on the one on a certain foot like we do in other dances. But like I said, I use this step as a teaching tool, as the people that taught Kizomba to me, for that reason, and also really get comfortable with the feeling of transferring your weight and using this knee and hip motion, because we do use the rocking action so much in Kizomba that it's really important to familiarize your body with it. So I use that version of Basic 3 as a teaching tool, and we do use it sometimes when we're dancing, but today I'm going to teach the real version of Basic 3, which is instead of doing 2 walks and a rock step, we're doing 2 walks and a tap, 2 walks and a tap, which, as I said before, occupies 6 counts in the music. So in today's video, we are going to be starting to understand how these counts kind of fit into Kizomba music, and really getting comfortable with the idea of not always dancing on the one with our right foot if you're a follower, or with your left foot if you are a leader. So this version of the step looks like this. Walk, walk, tap, walk, walk, tap. Walk, walk, tap, walk, walk, tap. And as I said before, it takes up 6 counts. So I count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So there's no slow beats. Each action that we do occupies 1 count. So now we're going to use the same technique in our taps as we did in the previous step, in our basic 2. So we're going to go walk, walk, tap, walk, walk, tap. Walk, walk, tap, walk, walk, tap. So we're getting a lot of practice today with that version of the tap, which is the softer version where I'm still pushing into my tapping foot, but instead of creating this very angular tap, I'm creating a more circular, smaller movement that's a little bit softer, okay? So let's practice that again, and then I am going to introduce a variation which we will be using, which again is something that we dance by ourselves, but it is also something that the leader can lead. So we go, but we'll do this version first. So we go 1, 2, circular tap, 1, 2, circular tap. This might be a little bit easier than the basic 2 because both of the taps are occurring on my right foot, so I don't have to think about reversing the direction of the circle. I do the circle coming around with my right hip both times. So again, I go walk, walk, tap, and walk, walk, tap, and walk, walk, tap, and walk, walk, tap. Again, walk, walk, tap, and walk, walk, tap. Okay, so now as I said, I want to introduce a variation of this which is very commonly used when you're being led in Kizomba, and I also really love to use it when I'm dancing Kizomba by myself, which is a rotating tap from our backward movement. So I go 1, 2, and then I'm going to rotate, and which is then going to take my right foot diagonally backward. So instead of doing my tap right in place, if my leader rotates his chest, that's going to be reflected in my hips and subsequently in my foot. And from here, I am going to use that tap that we worked on in the first video. So that does come up in our dance practice, so it's a good thing to know. So I'm going up, down, and then I come back 1, 2, and we're going to do our normal circular tap. So I go 1, 2, and up, down, and 1, 2, circular tap. An important thing to know, a lot of my students make this mistake when I'm first teaching them this step. They'll go 1, 2, and go here. This is a side step in which I haven't done any rotation in my hips. Or they'll go out to the side and then rotate their hips. What we want to do, like I said, we want to rotate our hips rotate our feet, because our hips are rotating, and that, if I'm dancing with my partner, is caused by the leader's chest rotating. So the leader rotates his chest, I rotate my hips, and that's what takes my foot on a diagonal. I don't want to send my foot out and then turn my hips, or send my foot out without turning my hips. So I go 1, 2. Now, because my foot, the trajectory of my foot would be to come in, if I were just doing my normal basic 3, I'm going to slide it in anyway. So that's a step that I don't want to forget to do, because then the step becomes very clunky. I want to pass through the middle to get here, and then pass through the middle to come back, so that this has a very nice, graceful, sexy look to it. So again, I'm going 1, 2, and bum, bum, 1, 2, and tap. 1, 2, gather, and as and tap. And 1, 2, and press, release. 1, 2, tap. And 1, 2, gather and twist. I'm really kind of sinking into this left hip here. Press, release, come back. 1, 2, and tap. Okay, so now let's give that one a shot with music. Halftime, here we go. From a past lesson before we add a new figure today is this walking and rocking step going backward, where we go back, rock to the side, step back, back, rock to the side, which I presented in the second Kizomba Basics video. In that video, we were working a lot on creating the pelvic movement from the center, which is something that we are going to continue to practice. However, I do want to reinforce the concept that I introduced in the basic one today by also practicing it in this step. What that's going to look like is, instead of keeping the feet on the ground when I do this rock step now, I am actually going to lift that heel, the heel that I'm rocking off of, to create a little bit more of an exaggerated action in the hips and the legs, okay? So, I'm going to go back, side, and I'm going to allow this heel to lift off the ground like I did in the basic one, and then put it back down to change my weight. So again, I go 1, 2, and 3, and 4. 1, 2, and 3, and 4. So we're just practicing, instead of keeping the feet planted or lifting them off the ground to place the weight back down, doing something in between, an in-between action in which I am lifting my heel off the ground, but keeping both feet in the same spot that they're in. And to allow for that, letting the air out of the balloon feeling, which will in turn allow me to exaggerate more my midsection, my core actions, okay? So let's try that again. I'm going 1, 2, and 3, and 4. 1, 2, and 3, and 4. It's very subtle. 1, 2, and 3, and 4. 1, 2, lift, place, and so same thing as in the basic one. I'm lifting, and then I'm putting the heel back down and pressing into this leg to change the angle of my hips and my weight. One more time. We go. 1, 2, and 3, and 4. 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 Okay? So let's practice that variation now with music. Here we go. Halftime. Ready, and 1, 2, and 3, 4. Reviewed and made some more advanced modifications to the steps that we already know. Now I'm going to introduce a new concept in today's lesson, which is the cha-cha. In its most basic form, we are going to practice the cha-cha facing in one direction. However, it is very commonly used rotating. So the step itself looks like this. As a follower, I'm going 1, 2, cha-cha. Okay, and that's the entire step. We can do continuous cha-chas, we can do turning cha-chas. There's a million variations, but that is the most basic form of the step. So again, I'll demonstrate it from behind, and then I'm going to explain a little bit more about how we use this step. So I am going rock, step, cha-cha. Practice that again. We go 1, 2, cha-cha. And again, 1, 2, cha-cha. 1, 2, cha-cha. 1, 2, cha-cha. Okay? Or I'm going to count it just with numbers now. It's 1, 2, 3, and 1, 2, 3, and 1, 2, 3, and 1, 2, 3, and. So like I said, part of this lesson now is getting used to figures that don't occupy 4 or 8 counts, but figures that also only occupy 3 counts, and getting used to fitting those into our 4/4 time music. So now we very infrequently dance the cha-cha step just in this way of going back, forward, side, together. Like I said, a lot of times it's danced rotating. That's a much more frequent way that it's led. It can come out of a saída, it can come out of a basic 3. What we are practicing here is, as followers, conditioning ourselves to always be ready to do a cha-cha after we step forward on our left foot. So, for example, if I was doing a saída, which is a step that I haven't covered yet, but I'm going to cover in our next Kizomba Basics video. If I were to do my saída and I stepped forward on my left, from here I could do a cha-cha. Okay? If I'm doing my basic 3, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, from here I could do a cha-cha. So we're practicing getting into our muscle memory that any time the leader leads us forward on the left foot, the next step that we do, if it is a sideways step, is going to be a cha-cha. And this is something that takes a lot of getting used to. I have my followers ask me a lot, well, how was I supposed to know that was a cha-cha? Just from practicing, from getting it into your muscle memory that anytime you step forward on your left, if the next step is moving to the side, it's a cha-cha. So just getting used to that. So this is a really good one to practice on your own, so that when you are dancing with a partner, you don't end up on the wrong foot and confused and having to have your partner kind of stop and start over for you, okay? So we're going to practice it one more time facing the same direction as we go, and then we are going to practice it rotating, which, as I said, is a much more common way to dance this step. So I'm going 1, 2, 3, and 1, 2, 3, and 1, 2, 3, and 1, 2, 3, and. Before we move on to the rotation, I just want to say one thing about the technique of the cha-cha. Because it is a syncopated step, what my students tend to do, because they have to speed up, is they'll do this really nicely, and then they kind of freeze up and do that with their feet on the cha-cha. We do want to continue to use the hips and the knees the same way that we do in every other step. What I recommend, because it's faster, is to try to just gently keep the heels off the ground as you do it, because it will make you a little bit more agile, a little easier to move quickly and still maintain the hip action than if I'm trying to press into the ground as I go. That being said, I don't want to be up on my tippy toes. I do still want to get the feeling of pressing into the ground, but keeping the heels off the ground does allow us to move a little bit faster. So like I said, last time facing the same direction. I know I said that last time, but practicing it now with that technique in mind. So I go step, step, cha-cha. 1, 2, 3, and 1, 2, 3, and 1, 2, 3, and 1, 2, 3, and. Okay? So now, practicing it in a rotating fashion. We're going to do our rock step, and then on the cha-cha, I'm going to do a quarter of a turn to the left, okay? And eventually, I will do an entire 360 revolution with 4 cha-chas. So it looks like this. 1, 2, 3, and 1, 2, 3, and 1, 2, 3, and 1, 2, 3, and. So every time I do my cha-cha, I'm doing a quarter of a turn to the left. So let's try that again. I go rock, step, turn, and rock back, and turn, and rock, and turn, and rock, and turn, and. Okay? One more time, and then we'll practice it facing one direction and also rotating with music. Last time rotating, we go rock, step, turn, and rock. Step, turn, and rock. Step, turn, and rock. Step, turn, and. And again, just like with all dances, because the cha-cha is an accelerated step, because it's syncopated, I'm going to make the size of my step much smaller than if I were doing a full count or a slow beat rock step to the side. Okay, so now, like I said, let's practice it in both forms with music. First, facing forward, half time. 5, 6, ready, we go. 1, 2, cha-cha. 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 1. rotate, as well as a couple figures that I taught in the last Kizomba Basics video. In this practice routine, we are going to be practicing a couple different concepts, which I brought up earlier in the video, which are not starting each new figure now exactly on the one of the music. So we're getting used to flowing with Kizomba music in a more authentic way, which does not require us to always be on the one on our right foot as a follower. And we're also going to practice rotating. So the way that I've structured this routine, it rotates each time you do it a quarter of a turn. So it's a great routine to practice, to try and do it 4 times in a row so that we practice getting used to looking at different parts of the room as we're dancing and not having to dance a certain step in a linear fashion, which will definitely serve us when we are dancing with a partner, because as followers we don't have control over the direction that we're facing when we are being led, okay? So we're working on those 2 concepts, as well as, of course, all of the techniques that we learned in today's video. So the routine, I'll show you facing you first, and then I will break it down facing away. We go 1, 2, and 3, 4, and 5, 6, 7, 8. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, 6, 7, 8. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And then we can start over with our basic 1 and continue to rotate in that fashion. Okay? So now I'll explain everything that I'm doing as I do it, facing away so that you can easily follow along. So we do our basic 1, and 1, 2, and 3, 4. Basic 2, 5, 6, 7, 8. Basic 3 with the tap instead of the rock step. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Basic 3 variation with the cha-cha tap. 7, 8, 1, and 2, 3. Now I'm going to go right into my cha-cha. 4, and rotating a quarter of a turn to the left. So from my cha-cha tap, I go 1, and 2, 3, 4, and now I'm going to go into my walking and rocking step. 5, 6, 7, 8. 1, 2, 3, 4. I'm going to do one more of these, but when I rock to the side with my left, I'm going to rotate my body an 1/8 of a turn to the left to go into my rock step back with both feet, which is a step that we covered in the Kizomba Basics 2 video. The reason that I'm rotating to get into that, I'm rotating my hips and not so much my chest, is because if I were being led to do this step, the leader would rotate me so that he could step outside partner. He's stepping over to the side of me instead of directly at me. And me rotating my hips allows him the space to do that. So on my last step, I went 5, 6, 7, 8, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7, and I'm going to start my rock step back on 8. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, coming together on 8. Now I'm going to finish the routine by doing my rock step to the side and back into the center. So I go rock, side, and center, rock, side, and center. And the counts on that are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and from here I can start my basic 1 again, basic 2, basic 3, doing the whole routine, like I said, rotating or starting now in a different direction and continuing to rotate as we practice it, okay? So let's try that again. We go basic 1, and 1, 2, and 3, 4, basic 2, 5, 6, 7, 8, basic 3, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, variation, 7, 8, 1 and 2, 3, cha-cha, 4 and 5, 6, 7, 8, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, get ready to rotate, 6 and 7, 8, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, come together, 8, and rock to the side, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and I can start again with my basic 1 on the right foot. Okay, so now let's give that a shot with music. Okay, so we're going to do the whole routine, real time, 4 times through. 6, ready, we go. On 1, on 2.
So much for joining me for today's lesson. Leave a comment below and let me know how you did. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on the post notifications for my channel. You can also follow me on Instagram at Dance Doctor Online. Until next time, keep dancing.